general committee meeting at 6 p.m. at Conference Room 2, City Hall. We have our minutes, June 8, 2021. Entertain a motion to approve those. So moved by Mr. Waters.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Hayes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Next up, we have ordinance rezoning 216 Sanders Ferry Road and approving comprehensive plan to govern the development of said property.
Mr. Chairman, I need to run into another meeting just a minute. Could you take up two ordinances I have first?
Where you at?
Maybe 4 and 5.
Yes.
Okay.
We will disregard that last statement and go to ordinance 4 and 2021-27, amending zoning ordinance City of Hendersonville regarding building materials. The mayor and I both have sponsored that. I will let him address it, and Mr. Free, if you.
I'm going to turn to Mr. Free.
And I will turn to Mr. Whitten. Yeah, it works.
Who's got the ball? Anybody else pass?
Yeah.
Take it all.
Now, let me preface this by saying, read that the state legislature has taken some moves to do some things. Our planning department feels that the city is probably not maybe in the best interest that we follow those guidelines exactly, but in order to make that work for us, we have to take some action tonight and in 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
That's correct. And what we're doing and what Timothy's going to explain, this is nothing we want to do. It's just what we have to do to make these changes, to be compliant with the new state law.
Yeah, so as the chairman said, the state law that was passed says basically that your zoning ordinance cannot prohibit any building materials. And if you do have any regulations pertaining to building materials, this is exterior building materials, that you have to provide for a waiver process for that. And then it gives it has some other sections in there that deals with how you go about complying with this law. And then it gives a September 1st deadline of this year for getting that done. So in order for our ordinance to be in the best position possible to comply with that law and not be in a position where we could have our zoning ordinance challenged legally, we determined that we need to, there are certain sections in our ordinance that need to be amended. Those are listed in the ordinance in, I think it's Exhibit B. And that's basically to remove any express prohibitions for certain building materials. And then Exhibit A lists sections that we need to readopt because they speak to building materials. That's what this ordinance does. Again, the legislature gave us the barest amount of time to get this done before September 1st, which is why this is also on the tonight's BOMA agenda. So at BOMA, there will need to be a vote to allow this to be on the same agenda, not have that mandated 2-week gap. But that's the sum of it. And I will point out that as far as the amendments, the changes we've made are just the bare minimum needed to comply with that state law. So we haven't gone in and monkeyed around with anything else. Y'all should have access to a side-by-side comparison showing the current ordinance as it exists. And then on the opposite side, it shows the change. So you can kind of compare the two, contrast those changes.
Do you feel comfortable that we have covered our bases so that we can still control those materials?
Yes, I'm comfortable. We've made the essential changes needed. The fact of the matter is that our controls on materials are not what they were. If this goes through.
Yes.
But they're as solid as they can be and still comply with the ordinance.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you getting that together so quickly. And I know we're trying to meet state guidelines, and at the same time, we have standards in Hendersonville as well, and we want to make sure that we continue to present those standards. So
And I'll just say, Timothy did a great job with this. I mean, you can see the amount of work that had to go into it, and we need to be meticulous about it. And he had a very short time frame that he was given this task, and did a really good job. I think a lot of other cities are going to really be struggling to meet this deadline and probably won't meet it. And they're going to face some issues in not doing so.
We just said the deadline was September 1st, September 1.
So we'll go ahead and vote on this tonight. And I just really appreciate our planning department. You guys are the best, absolutely the best.
They rock.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Protecting our city, its investments, the values of all the properties, everything from Main Street to the back streets. This is a lot of detail, Mr. Timothy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, you have anything to add there?
There's no way I can add any more information with it.
Yeah, I'm pretty well with you between Timothy and Jonathan. I'm good. So let's vote. Mr. Waters, you in favor of this?
Absolutely.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes, sir.
All right, I am. And I will try to, will you add that tonight, Mayor? Will you
I
do it?
will, we just need to acknowledge that it's already on the agenda. You got your packet.
Okay. We'll do-
Is it okay if I just put that Jim Waters made motion and seconded by Jonathan Hayes?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That was kind of assumptive. on
Yeah.
my part that you figured that
Yeah.
out.
And it was unanimous.
Ordinance 2021-28, an ordinance establishing a consent agenda for meetings, of board mayor and all.
Whole point of this is to move things faster in our board meetings, especially items that don't really need much discussion. Very often those are items that have been considered in committees and been hashed out ahead of time. But I know that Russ wants to speak a little bit on this as well.
Well, I was gonna say, Mayor, if you wanted to, if you would be willing to change your ordinance, or if the general committee wants to amend it to, well, you have guidelines for citizens' comments, if we could add and public hearings. I think we probably need to have the same guidelines to citizens' comments as we do public hearings. And this may be a good opportunity to add that in.
And often we've done that. I think Russ has made a motion recently during public hearings that we abide by the same guidelines. I'm fine with that. If y'all want to take action and encourage that, and pass your own amendment, or I can just include it in this when we get before.
The only thing different with public hearings and citizen comments is timeframes. So we would have to leave the time. Are we talking about amending those timeframes to 5 minutes?
It would be the whole list of rules that you have there. Maybe all those, not just the 5 minutes, but also the other 6 guidelines.
This is assuming we can. I need to speak with Attorney Bradley. I assume public comments, there's no prohibition on timeframe. So
I don't know from what we got set up if there would be or not, but what I would think we would do would go ahead and move this through committee like it's sitting right now. It's an ordinance, so it's going to take 2 votes. And we can have Bradley address that then. You good with that?
Good with that?
Russ, that satisfy you?
whatever y'all want to do.
If y'all see any other potential changes, please let me know. I'm willing to consider them and not have to amend it at the board.
Okay.
Thank you. I move approval then.
A second.
Mr. Hayes to approve and Mr. Waters seconds. Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Waters.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, we'll drop back, we'll go back up to ordinance 2021-26, an ordinance rezoning 2216 Sanders Ferry Road and approving comprehensive plan to govern the development of said property. I will move that to get it on the floor for any discussion.
Well, I want to say that I've watched.
Right now, there can be no discussion, hasn't been a second.
I'll second.
Okay, you may discuss.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. I've watched both of the planning commission meetings. I listened to all of the comments. I listened to the entirety of both meetings, especially related to this. I have spoken to the developers. I've spoken to Mr. Cook. I'm not sure that there's anything that we can really add to what has already been said, but I guess what I'm thinking is I'd like for us to be able to move this forward to BOMA at the appropriate time. as soon as this committee is prepared to do that as well.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Boma's gonna have to listen to this anyway. They're gonna have to look at it. So it'd be my suggestion, maybe a motion to let's move it tonight on to Boma with a recommendation of approval or whatever.
To you, it's your motion.
Okay, let's move it on to Boma without us going through all this. We're going to do it anyway at Boma time.
Yes, sir.
So let's just avoid this one and go ahead and I'll make a motion that we move it to Boma with no recommendation.
I'll second that. I would offer Mr. Cook, since he is here representing the developer, if you'd like time, I certainly will give you time, because I know you're billing them for time, so. Wait, Tony, okay.
No, appreciate you folks and appreciate planning throughout the process. And all I would say tonight is, since the first meeting at planning, the developer has listened and worked with the planning department and are continuing to listen. And if there are any suggestions from this committee or planning department, I know they've already met with planning even since last week, but if there are suggestions on how to make this something that is more palatable for Boma, then they're all ears. I cannot guarantee that they would do everything that was asked, but I can guarantee that they will listen and they will consider any suggestions as to how this could be something that would be more acceptable to everyone.
I must add, Mr. Chairman, this will be the only meeting in July we're gonna have, right?
Yes, sir.
It'll be August 13th, I guess.
10th.
Yeah.
Tenth.
10th, I think, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, and the developer, they're aware of that.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
As the old preacher would say, all hearts clear.
Yes, sir.
The young preacher might say that too. I don't know. In this case, we're going to vote. Mr. Hayes.
I vote that we move it on with just as the recommendation from Mr. Waters.
Myself. Hit Boma on August 10th with a neutral recommendation. Ordinance 2021-29, and ordinance amending the Hendersonville Municipal Code, Title 9, Chapter 1, peddlers and solicitors. Mr. Campbell's the sponsor of that. I know he is not here, but basically what that boils down to is, I think the chiefs are here to speak to it. I don't think Mr. Campbell's here. It's establishing a no solicitors call base. Jim?
Yes.
You sit your at the table with the computer open. Mickey's over here.
So the gist of it is, we continue to receive calls from citizens throughout the city complaining about solicitors coming to their door, and it's unwanted. I know City Hall gets complaints, and from what I've heard, like several of Aldermen get complaints from their constituents. So we were looking at options on how to address that problem. And so what we came up with was Gallatin has a similar program. It's called the Do Not Solicit Registry. It involves the way Gallatin handles that is they have a tab on their website that a citizen can go to. They enter their name, their address, their email address, and they're entered it onto a Do Not Solicit Registry. Anytime someone gets a peddler's or solicitor's permit, again, the way Gallatin does it is they get a list of everyone who's on that Do Not Solicit Registry, which prohibits them from going to those residences. Should they do that and violate it anyway, they can be cited into city court, which is what we've added into our amendment to the ordinance here. One of the things we did discuss is if there's a huge number of people that sign up for that, the list could become pretty voluminous. So what we may do is give them a card instead that directs them to a web link that they have to look it up. It puts the responsibility on them to look that list up and notate where they can and can't go. And speaking with Mr. Bradley this morning, there's probably we have another section that addresses revocation of permits. And the initial draft of the ordinance I'd put in there that if they violate that, in addition to citations, their permit is revoked. And so in speaking to Mr. Bradley, there may be to be a little tweaking of the wording to ensure that this section of the ordinance does not conflict with the other section on revocation. So he's gonna look at that and make some small changes on the wording to make sure that there's no conflict. But basically it gives the citizens the opportunity to stop peddlers from coming to their door when they don't want people knocking on their door trying to sell them something. So
We're assuming that they will register and get a permit and then get this list.
yes, but obviously, right now, they can be cited for failure if they're peddling or soliciting without a permit. We can already cite them for that. But if they have a permit and they're going to people's door and those people are complaining about it, there's really nothing we can do to address that. Whereas with this amendment to the ordinance, then that would be a separate citable offense for soliciting at somebody's residence and someone do not solicit registry.
How well is that working at the road?
Ian, speaking with their assistant chief, he seems to feel like it's working pretty well. I'm sure they still have violations because they do issue citations for that. But he seems to feel like that it's helped, but it was probably the best option we could come up with at this point. That's why initially in the draft, we were trying to put a little more teeth in it, that if you do violate the do not solicit registry, in addition to a citation, you lose your permit, you can't reapply for a new one for 6 months. So, but again, that's going to be where Mr. Bradley has to make sure there's no conflict with the way our ordinance is currently written.
You get, this is just for conversation, just thinking out loud. A pest control company come by early in the spring. Nice kid. Just totally wasn't interested. He kept at it. But they were soliciting all over the city and they were governed out of Clarksville. So he called his boss because I asked him about a permit. He said, well, I don't have my permit with me. The boss has got it. So you need to call your boss, find out your permit is. And so he called his boss. Now here would be my question. If these, I wouldn't say kids, he was a kid to me, but if these kids are sent out to solicit and they're not given the proper information from their boss, their supervisor in the field, I don't necessarily feel like the kid should get popped. I feel like the supervisor should get popped. So
I don't disagree with you, but that's
is there any way that we can make
that's a
that work on both
responsibility you
ends?
take on yourself when you go out to solicit like that. I mean, you take on that to be in compliance.
Is there any way you could go back on that and get the person at the door plus the person that is your supervisor that knows that they have to have it?
I think
that's a Mr. Bradley question.
yeah, that would probably be one from Mr. Bradley. I mean, it could probably be amended into the ordinance, but usually for us anyway, we deal with the person who's actually committing the violation, not the person who sent them there to do that.
The only reason I ask that is I've been a door knocking salesman in my younger years.
Mhm.
And I've had door knocking salesmen work for me in my younger years. And you get a young 25-year-old that's hungry and eager and you give them material and you tell them where to go, they'll go. You don't have to give them a whole lot more. And they may end up violating when their boss didn't do the job, so I have that concern, but I don't know if there's any way you can make that concern.
So the 6-month probation or time off, that wouldn't be related directly to the company. That'd be directly related to the individual that knocked on the door.
No, that would go back to the company.
Okay,
because
so
if
there's
that
some
part of
portion.
that is enacted, they lose their
privilege.
ability, their privilege to solicit within the city.
Ooh.
And that would include all of their employees within, if they'd be in violation if
Yeah.
they're still out solicited. So, and one thing, and this came up in public safety, and just want to emphasize that here, that does not include religious organizations that are going door to door, kids with the school selling candy bars, or people canvassing for political purposes, because they're not required to have a permit anyway.
Probably should.
So I'm not gonna go down.
I
that
do
road.
wish you would outlaw that too.
Girl Scout cookies is okay, isn't it?
That's okay.
Well, I like the 6-month thing because that, You know, it was back before COVID, there was a company that sells internet service. I'll let you figure out who that is. That was like a swarm of bees all over the city, and especially on Indian Lake Peninsula. You couldn't turn a corner, there wasn't a blue-green shirt someplace. And a lot of their solicitors were kind of in that trap that I was talking about a while ago. And they're sent out by the home office by 40, 50, and 100 at a time. So if it gets back to that 6 months rule where the company itself would have to pay some attention, then it might make the solicitation quite a bit better. So I'm glad to hear that.
Alderman Campbell, did you?
No, I just stepped in case you had any questions with me, since it's a public safety.
Thank you for bringing this
Yes,
forward.
sir. I guess, I think we've all had.
Yeah.
Neighbors call us and complain about a door knock
Yes.
too early or too late, or just for
Rude.
whatever reason.
They're rude.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Well, I move we approve.
Anybody here got anything?
I second it.
Move to approval by Mr. Hayes, seconded by Mr. Waters. I'll vote first and say yes. Mr. Waters,
Yes.
Mr. Hayes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. All right, now we have a resolution ratifying park policies and procedures of the city of Hendersonville. Mr. Gilly, you're here. You have roughly 25 minutes.
I would take 5.
I'll give you 7 since we're dealing.
Over the course of the past few years before my time, there have been additions and revisions to the athletic manual that's been in place for probably 30 years. At the request of the mayor, we put all these additions, revisions into one document and want to get the board's blessing on these. The ordinance does give the Parks Board the authority to put these in place. But I do think from time to time, it's probably a good idea to get these things ratified by you all. It gives us teeth that we probably don't have otherwise. I compliment Dallas on his work on all this. He really went through the weeds on all of them. Had to go back through minutes of the old Parks Board meetings. We had to work with some other cities to make sure, other people are doing kind of the same things we're doing. Also included in that resolution is approval of a photographer registration form so that we can get, a lot of times when people want to have a big tournament, they'll hire a photographer as a vendor. If they'll come in and take pictures, the team will buy the picture. But we didn't have anything in place to actually deal with those photographers the same as we did other vendors. So we needed to kind of make a change in that, the way we treated them. We had in place for people who wanted to do our league team pictures, but not something on a case-by-case basis. And it was a lot more difficult process than this. I'll entertain any questions. I think you all should have been sent a sheet that kind of was Cliff Notes version that addressed any significant changes. So anything you want to ask, we'll do our best to answer it.
I'd be curious if Assistant Director Long would have any other comments that you'd want to share with us.
I do not.
Okay.
That pretty much covers it all, so.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
This is so thorough.
Yeah, this is much needed, I believe. Our old meeting was lacking, I think, so this was definitely needed. It's update.
Director Gilly, y'all have really stepped up. Your communication to the community with the BOMA, from the Parks Board itself, you all are just knocking it out of the park.
How was the tournament this weekend?
This past weekend, I think if you went around and visited all the restaurants, they'd tell you it was a good week.
180 teams.
I don't know how many.
100 more started.
I've got a friend who worked at the hotel up here.
Yeah.
He just flabbergasted about the attendance
Mhm.
based on 6 months ago, or maybe a year ago.
Sure.
Thank you.
I think we'll see that number at the end of this month when Robert collects all the checks. It'll be a good one.
Good. Did you hear that, Robert?
Have a week. We'll find out.
Mr. King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was in one of the large grocery stores over the weekend, Saturday to be exact. Ran into 2 young ladies on 18 U Bandits out of St. Louis and their parents. And I just said, how's the tournament going, ladies? And it's, oh, we're going, we just got eliminated, but we've had a fantastic time in this town. The people have been so helpful. When we needed something, they have pointed us in the right direction. You're so friendly in this town. Like you just asked us, how's it going? You just walked up and started talking to us. Said it's amazing. And you got a wonderful facility, awesome ballpark, awesome facilities, knocking it just, they can't wait to come back. I just want to share that with you.
Thank you.
Mr. Trilling?
And just to show how far folks are coming, I ran into a pack of girls today, and they were here from Minnesota. A long way to our town.
Yeah.
When's the next one?
It's supposed to start today. We have 100 more girls teams in town today. Totally different.
Start
They'll be
today?
here till Saturday.
Saturday?
Yeah, in conversations that I have at some of these, I will relay to you, restaurateurs were very happy, to the point that I wish they'd call, but before they came, because there's 25 of them, but we'll take them.
I'll turn them away.
I can tell you for a fact, at one time, one of the local grocers run out of Powerade and had to go to a sister store to get Powerade. Because Barry was buying it for umpires.
Yes.
It was good all the way around. You could not find a place to park. I went through the parks twice, saw vehicles parked in spots that I'm not even sure how they got into that spot. They had to get into it and people parked in front of them, so had to. So I saw one family that were picnicking and fishing in the creek, that they had two girls with them that had ball uniforms on. So they enjoyed the park as well as just playing in the park. So, you've done well. All right. Any questions on this?
I move that we accept it.
I second
Ralph,
it.
I haven't asked you whether you want to add anything to anything, but I should.
Thank you, but no, thank you.
Okay. All right. It's been moved to approve by Mr. Hayes. Mr. Waters.
And I second.
Mr. Hayes is a second. Mr. Hayes, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Waters?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
Good job, Andy.
Thank you, sir.
It was all Dallas.
It was pretty much. Let's be-
Keith Bruce.
Let's be honest.
Our old assistant
Mostly
director.
Dallas.
It's all that.
You sleep well tonight, won't you?
We've got a few minutes left. If anybody's got anything else they feel like we need to talk about right now or want to talk about that cannot be voted on, but it can be talked about.
Did anyone see the, I guess it's on News Meet or something, where they're still cutting that grass, it's going out in the street. It's this one kid had a motorcycle wreck,
Oh, no.
and
It'll
well,
kill
no,
you.
we have an ordinance.
Yes,
Don't
sir.
we have an ordinance?
Yes, sir.
sir.
Sure do.
And
Mr. Brown.
Do we find the owner of the operation, like it's a outside vendor? Or do we find the homeowner,
The person doing the cutting the grass, who gets the
the
citation?
vendor? Yeah.
So whether it's a homeowner cutting the grass or, business cutting the grass, it's whoever's doing the cutting.
It's
gets
so
the
dangerous,
citation.
I tell you.
You ought to hit it on a motorcycle. It's like riding on ice.
That's all I have.
Well, I just have a comment. I've complimented already planning and parks, and while our police folks are here, just want to congratulate you again on 50 years
Thanks, sir.
here in Hendersonville. You are doing a great job and we appreciate you. You know, this city supports our police and we want to thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that.
All right. Motion adjourned.
So moved.
Mr. Hayes, Mr. Waters,
Second.
Yes, sir.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'm done. Tina. I'm done way early.
How much time we got? I tell you, I like this 1 hour show. I tell you.
That's nice, isn't it?
30 minutes.
We could have used it if we went to this first.
Oh, my God.
Good meeting.
Yeah.
Very good meeting.
They're doing good. Yeah, they're doing great. Yeah.
I forgot to find out the part. Hold on, start over again.
Yeah.
51. Since the very get-go.
You
You weren't born yet, were you? No.
Yeah.
We are not.
Just everybody remember that until it's ended, the meeting's not going on, but it's still recording.
Okay.
Just to let everybody know.
We are live.
Yeah, it's still,
When
so
is it gonna end?
whenever it ends there.
Whenever Tina hits in?
Whenever to
I'll leave it on there.
get all this gossip on record.
You as well.
There we go. Thank you, Tina.
We- every-
Thank